Hey everyone, and welcome. We're about to tackle a really important topic for your BCBA exam, discontinuous measurement procedures. Our goal here is to get you totally comfortable with section C.6 of the task list, so you can feel confident on test day.
So let's just start with a super practical problem, one that every single one of us faces out in the field. Imagine you're in a chaotic classroom or a really dynamic therapy session. How in the world are you supposed to collect accurate data when you just can't have your eyes on a client every single moment? It's a real challenge, right?
Well, we're going to answer that question by breaking it all down. We'll look at the measurement dilemma itself, then we'll open up the toolkit of solutions. After that, we'll figure out how to choose the right tool for the job, talk about a major data trap you need to avoid, and then wrap it all up with what you need to know to absolutely ace this on the exam.
Okay, let's dive right in. Why do we even need these special methods? I mean, what's wrong with the good old-fashioned way of just counting a behavior or timing it directly?
Well, truth is, there's nothing wrong with it at all. In fact, continuous measurement, things like frequency and duration, that's the gold standard. But let's be real, the reality of our work is that it's often just not possible. It creates this very real need for a different kind of, more practical solution.
So, what's the solution? Well, it's a set of tools we call time sampling, or more formally, discontinuous measurement. Basically, instead of trying to record everything all the time, we're just going to record samples of behavior within specific chunks of time.
First up, we've got partial interval recording, or PIR for short. Now, the key phrase you need to burn into your brain here is at any time. If that behavior happens for even a split second during your interval, let's say it's a 10-second interval, you put a check mark. You score that whole interval as an occurrence.
Next up is whole interval recording, or WIR. This one is pretty much the exact opposite, and it's way stricter. To score the interval, the behavior has to happen continuously for the entire time. If there's any break at all, even for a second, you do not score it.
And finally, we have momentary time sampling, or MTS. I like to think of this one as taking a quick snapshot. You only look up at the client at the precise moment your interval timer goes off. Is the behavior happening right then and there? Yes, you score it. No, you don't. Everything else that happened during that interval, totally irrelevant.
This little table here just boils it down perfectly. PIR is all about any point. WIR is throughout, and MTS is at the exact end. If you can just nail this distinction, you are honestly halfway there. Okay, so we've met the tools, but how do you actually pick the right one? This isn't just a random guess. It's a really important clinical decision that's based on the specific behavior you're trying to measure.
And this chart really lays out that fundamental choice you have to make. If you're dealing with something quick or that doesn't happen very often, like a hit or a curse word, you're going to lean towards partial interval. But if you're measuring something that's more continuous, like a student being on task, then you're probably going to look at whole interval or momentary time sampling.
So let's dig into that a little bit. You're going to pick PIR when you have a behavior you want to see less of, especially if it's one of those quick actions that you just can't afford to miss. Think about something like aggression. You need a system that's sensitive enough to catch any instance, and that's exactly what PIR is built for.
On the flip side, for behaviors you want to see more of, like a student staying focused or a child playing nicely, WIR or MTS are your go-to tools. And why is that? Because for these behaviors, what you really care about is sustained engagement. You want to know that the behavior is happening consistently, not just popping up for a split second.
And this brings up a huge point. Practicality matters. A teacher who's trying to keep an eye on a whole classroom, they just can't use a method that demands all of their attention. This is where momentary time sampling is a total lifesaver. They can just scan the room when their timer beeps and get a quick snapshot of who's on task. Okay, but here comes a really critical warning. And trust me, this is a major topic on the BCBA exam. These tools, they aren't perfect. Because you're just sampling behavior, you're only getting an estimate. And sometimes that estimate can be pretty misleading. This whole issue is what we call a measurement artifact. The artifact isn't really about the behavior itself, it's a distortion that's created by the way you decided to measure it. And discontinuous measurement is one of the main culprits for these artifacts. All right, if there is one thing you write down today, this is it. This is maybe the most important takeaway for your exam. Partial interval recording tends to overestimate behavior. Whole interval recording tends to underestimate it. Let's look at why that is. Okay, so PIR overestimates because any occurrence, no matter how tiny, makes you score the whole interval.
So think about it. A single 2-second hit that happens in a 1-minute interval gets recorded exactly the same way as a behavior that lasted for the full 60 seconds. See how that artificially inflates your data?
And as you can probably guess, whole interval does the exact opposite. It underestimates. A student could be perfectly on task for 59 seconds of a 60-second interval, but if they look away for just one single second, nope, you can't score that interval. It makes their engagement look way lower than it actually was.
All right, let's pull all this together. We're going to wrap up with some really concrete tips to help you lock this all in your brain so you can absolutely crush this section on the exam.
Be on the lookout for these key words in exam questions. Seriously, they are direct, unambiguous clues. If a question says at any time, your brain should immediately scream partial interval, which overestimates. If you see throughout or entire, think whole interval and underestimation. And if you see at the moment, that's your big signal for MTS.
And last but not least, you have to know how to report the data. For all three of these methods, the answer is always the same, as a percentage of intervals. All you have to do is take the number of intervals you scored, divide it by the total number of intervals you observed, and then just multiply by 100. Simple as that. So that leaves us with one final and really important thought for your actual clinical practice. Choosing the right tool isn't just about the type of behavior. It's also about the clinical risk. So you have to ask yourself, if I'm tracking something like aggression, is it more dangerous to overestimate it or to underestimate it? Your answer to that question is really what should guide your measurement choice in the end.